What if the entire world had been watching a carefully constructed illusion? What if the children paraded before cameras, wrapped in royal blankets and presented as heirs of both Windsor and Diana's bloodline, were not what they seemed? This is not just a question whispered in the dark corners of conspiracy forums anymore. Today, it's a headline crashing into the royal narrative like a storm, one that leaves Prince Harry trembling. Because if Tom Bower, the relentless investigative author with a history of shaking royal walls, is right, then the very foundation of Harry's identity as a father collapses. The opening moments of this scandal feel like a punch in the gut. For years, Harry and Meghan have presented Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana as their most cherished symbols of independence, love, and freedom from the monarchy's rigid traditions. Their children were not just babies. They were banners waved to show the world that this was a new kind of royal family, one that could rewrite the script. But beneath the photo ops, beneath the Netflix documentaries, and beneath Meghan's carefully crafted speeches, Tom Bower's words slash through the fairy tale. He dares to suggest that Archie and Lilibet are not Harry's biological children. And if that's true, then what becomes of Harry, of his marriage, of the very dynasty he once fled to protect? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The tension in this story begins long before Bower's bombshell. We must return to the strange optics surrounding Meghan's pregnancies. The public remembers the moments that never felt quite right. The sudden appearances with a shifting baby bump, the strange silence about medical details, the secrecy around births, the lack of transparency compared to traditional royal protocols. In the palace, these inconsistencies were brushed aside as Meghan's attempt to live privately. But outside, the whispers grew louder. Was surrogacy involved? Was there a donor? Did Harry truly know everything? These questions never found answers, only growing shadows. Now picture Harry, a man already fractured by grief, trauma, and estrangement from his family. He has spent years clinging to Meghan as his anchor, and his children as his proof that he has built something real away from the monarchy's suffocating control. To suggest that Archie and Lilibet are not his flesh and blood is not just an attack on Meghan. It is an attack on Harry's very soul. Imagine the panic coursing through him as this story breaks. Panic not only because of what the world might believe, but because deep down, he may also fear what he himself has ignored. The introduction to this scandal is not just about Tom Bower's words, but about what those words ignite. They reopen old wounds. Harry's lifelong fear of being the outsider, the child whose own paternity was once questioned in tabloids linking Diana to James Hewitt. The irony is cruel. The boy who grew up under whispers that he was not Charles's son now faces whispers that his own children are not his. For Harry, this is no longer about protecting Meghan or shielding Archie and Lilibet. This is about the weight of generational doubt, a cycle of suspicion that seems to chase him like a curse. Bower's revelation also hits the royal family like a silent detonation. The monarchy is built on bloodlines. Succession, legitimacy, titles, all depend on biological certainty. If Archie and Lilibet are not Harry's, then the monarchy sidesteps them easily, perhaps even gleefully. King Charles, already cautious about how far Harry and Meghan might exploit their children for fame and profit, suddenly sees a path to severing ties without guilt. William, the heir who has watched his brother dismantle royal credibility piece by piece, may now feel vindicated. And the institution itself, cold and calculating as ever, would treat Bower's claims not as scandal, but as strategy. The middle of this introduction must dwell in the human drama. Harry's panic cannot be explained through headlines alone. Imagine him pacing in Montecito, clutching his phone as advisors warn him of the growing storm. He calls Meghan into the room, his voice shaking, demanding answers she refuses to provide in the way he needs. Meghan, ever the strategist, frames it as an attack, another example of the media's obsession with tearing her down. But Harry doesn't just want strategy. He wants truth. And the truth is what terrifies him most. Outside their walls, the public begins to debate furiously. Some insist this is all fabricated by Bower to sell books. Others argue that too many signs have pointed toward something hidden. Social media burns with side-by-side photos, speculation about genetic resemblance, and resurrected footage of Meghan holding her shifting bump. The narrative is no longer in Harry and Meghan's control. It belongs to the masses, to the tabloids, to the millions who feel entitled to the truth because the Sussexes made their private lives a public spectacle. But what makes this introduction gripping is not simply the scandal. It is the stakes. If Bauer is right, Harry is not just betrayed by Meghan. He is robbed of fatherhood, stripped of identity, and exposed as the man who built his future on a lie. His image as the son who escaped his toxic family to build a healthier one collapses. His Netflix empire, centered around authenticity and truth-telling, crumbles. And his relationship with Meghan transforms from a love story into the ultimate con. The end of the introduction must not resolve these questions, but sharpen them. It must leave viewers desperate to know what happens when Bauer pushes further, when the palace reacts, when Harry begins to crack. So we end with a moment of silence. The image of Harry staring at a framed photo of Diana holding him as a child, wondering if he too was once a pawn in a bigger game. The camera lingers. The narrator asks, what if history is repeating itself? What if the royal child who was once accused of being illegitimate has raised children under the same shadow? And what if the truth Tom Bauer claims to hold could tear not just Harry's family apart, but the very image of the monarchy itself? This is where we leave the audience, breathless, unsettled, desperate for the next chapter. Because the storm has only begun, and Harry's panic is only the first sign of what could be the most devastating royal revelation of our time. Before Tom Bauer's words sliced through the fabric of Harry's carefully constructed life, there was the illusion of peace. On the surface, Montecito offered the perfect backdrop: sprawling estates, manicured gardens, the sound of the Pacific drifting across endless California skies. Harry and Meghan's world appeared serene, cocooned from the chaos of London tabloids and royal protocols. Archie and Lilibet were not just their children, but their trophies, proof that they had escaped the suffocating grip of the monarchy and built a sanctuary of love. Yet beneath the glossy images and staged interviews, there were cracks, hairline fractures in the story that no amount of PR polish could fully conceal. From the very beginning, Archie Harrison's arrival carried an air of mystery. Unlike William and Kate, who followed tradition by presenting their newborns outside the hospital, Harry and Meghan shrouded Archie's birth in secrecy. The location was unclear, the details vague, the press shut out entirely. Royal watchers felt a gnawing discomfort, as though the Sussexes were hiding more than just their desire for privacy. The palace released a statement late. Photographs came later still, and when they did, they raised more questions than answers. Why did Harry appear so nervous, so rehearsed? Why did Meghan smile as though she were already guarding a secret she had no intention of revealing? This secrecy was defended at the time as a modern choice, a refusal to play into archaic royal traditions. Meghan's supporters argued it was empowering, that she was protecting her child from the scrutiny that had destroyed Diana. But to critics, it was the first sign of something unusual. A child born into the House of Windsor is not just a child. He is a symbol, a bloodline, a future. And when that future is wrapped in silence, the questions begin. The same pattern repeated with Lilibet Diana. Born in America, she was introduced not with the pomp of royal announcements, but through carefully curated images and statements released on the Sussexes' terms. Once again, the details blurred. Where was the birth certificate? Why did the palace seem caught off guard? How was it that even family members appeared in the dark until the moment Meghan and Harry chose to unveil the news? Each layer of secrecy only fueled speculation, and though Harry may have believed he was protecting his children, he was planting seeds of doubt that would later grow into storms. The calm before the storm was not just about births, but about the image Harry and Meghan built around them. The couple presented their children as anchors in their new life, symbols of freedom from the institution that Harry claimed had destroyed his mother. Every Netflix documentary, every Oprah interview, every podcast was tinged with references to Archie and Lilibet as proof of authenticity. "We're just like any other parents," Meghan insisted, even as their lives were far removed from ordinary. The children became characters in their narrative, carefully shielded but also subtly leveraged. It is here, in the quiet before Bauer's revelation, that we must understand what Harry risked. For him, Archie and Lilibet were not merely children. They were redemption. After years of being labeled the reckless spare, the wild prince, the broken son of Diana. Harry clung to fatherhood as the one role he could not fail. He had abandoned his homeland, turned his back on his brother, and torched his bridges with the monarchy, all to build a life defined by love, truth, and family. If his children were not truly his, then everything he sacrificed would lose meaning. The storm had not yet broken, but its pressure could already be felt in the air. Royal insiders whispered about Meghan's strange approach to pregnancy. How she seemed to bend in ways that no expectant mother should. How her bump appeared and disappeared in suspicious ways. Photos circulated online showing inconsistencies, sparking rumors of prosthetic bumps or surrogacy. The palace did not comment, and Harry dismissed the chatter as cruelty. But those whispers did not fade. They lingered, waiting for a voice like Tom Bowers to amplify them. For Harry, life in California allowed him to believe he had escaped. His children played in gardens far from the cameras. His wife crafted projects to rebrand them as global icons, and he convinced himself that the doubts were just noise. Yet, deep down, he knew that secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface. Diana's life was proof of that. Her bulimia, her affairs, her recordings to Andrew Morton. Harry had grown up watching how private truths become public weapons. Now, as he stared at his children in their Montecito home, he could not have known that the same fate awaited him. The calm before the storm was fragile, almost deceptive. Meghan maintained her polished image. Harry worked on memoirs and projects, and their children were shielded behind high walls. But the air was thick with questions. Why did the Sussexes refuse to show Archie's face for months? Why did Lilibet appear only in tightly controlled photographs? Why was the world asked to accept narratives without evidence, stories without verification? For every supporter who believed in Meghan's right to privacy, there were skeptics who believed she was hiding the truth. And so, when Tom Bower finally opened his mouth, the world was primed to listen. The calm had been nothing more than a pause, a breath before the storm rolled in with thunder that could not be ignored. For Harry, that thunder would shatter everything he had tried to build. His family's image, his children's legitimacy, his very sense of fatherhood, all of it now hung in the balance. The chapter ends not with answers, but with questions sharpened like knives. What exactly was Meghan hiding during those pregnancies? Did Harry know, or was he just as blind as the rest of the world? And why, in a family obsessed with bloodlines, would the truth of Archie and Lilibet's parentage be the secret Harry feared most? The calm before the storm was over. The winds had shifted, and the first drops of rain were falling. Every story of scandal needs a voice to drag it from whispers into daylight. And in the case of Archie and Lilibet's parentage, that voice belonged to Tom Bower. To understand the weight of his revelation, one must first understand the man himself, because Tom Bower is not just another journalist. He is a seasoned biographer with a reputation for cutting through carefully spun narratives and leaving behind wreckage that cannot be ignored. In royal circles, his name carries a mix of dread and reluctant respect. Whenever he announces a new investigation, the corridors of power grow tense, because history has shown that Bower rarely misses his target. Bower built his career on fearlessness. He has taken on billionaires, politicians, and royal figures with equal ferocity, always digging where others fear to tread. His books are not gossip columns dressed up as literature. They are constructed with years of research, confidential interviews, and the kind of relentless persistence that keeps powerful people awake at night. In the past, he has drawn blood with works that expose corruption, hypocrisy, and scandal at the highest levels. When Tom Bower speaks, the world listens, not because he is always right, but because he is never afraid to say what others only dare to hint at. For Meghan and Harry, Bower had long been a shadow on their California horizon. He had already written extensively about Meghan, casting her not as a victim of royal cruelty, but as a calculating figure who engineered her escape from the palace and used her position for personal advancement. While her supporters dismissed these depictions as misogynistic caricatures, many royal insiders privately admitted that Bower's accounts often rang uncomfortably true. Meghan loathed the very idea of him. Harry resented the intrusion, but the damage was done. Bower had positioned himself as one of their most dangerous critics. When news broke that Bower was turning his sights on the children, Harry's panic was immediate. The children were his line in the sand. Criticize Meghan all you like, mock his choices, even attack his royal heritage, but do not touch Archie and Lilibet. They were sacred in his eyes, untouchable symbols of his love and freedom. But Tom Bower was not bound by such sentiment. He had no reverence for fairy tales, no interest in protecting feelings. His work was about exposing truths that others dared not confront. And in Archie and Lilibet, he saw not just children, but the epicenter of a controversy that could shake the monarchy to its foundations. The way Bower approached the subject was surgical. He did not begin with wild accusations, but with patterns, details, and inconsistencies that had long been overlooked or brushed aside. He highlighted Meghan's unusual pregnancy appearances, the secrecy around the births, and the lack of transparency compared to royal tradition. He connected dots between whispers of surrogacy, the absence of medical details, and the odd timing of announcements. Slowly, methodically, he built a case, not a tabloid fantasy, but a story of unanswered questions that demanded explanation. For viewers, this was the moment the story shifted from rumor to revelation. Anyone could speculate about Meghan's bump or the strange hospital arrangements. But when Tom Bower raised the question, it suddenly had gravity. This was not a fringe blogger or a royal gossip columnist. This was a man whose words had previously influenced political outcomes and brought reputations crashing down. And now, he was asking whether Archie and Lilibet were truly Harry's biological children. Imagine Harry's reaction when he first read Bower's claims. A chill must have run through him, not just because of the accusations themselves, but because he knew that once Bower had spoken, the questions would not fade. They would multiply, grow louder, and drag every hidden corner of his life into the light. Harry had spent years shielding his children from public gaze, but now their very identities were up for public dissection. He could no longer control the narrative. For Meghan, Bower's move was a challenge to her power. She had built her image as a woman of resilience, someone who could outmaneuver tabloids, silence critics with lawsuits, and reshape herself with every interview. But Bower was not a critic to be dismissed. He was a force. Her silence, once a weapon, now looked like evasion. Her legal threats, once effective, now risked amplifying the controversy. She could not ignore him, yet she could not fully confront him without exposing herself to more questions. In royal history, few figures have wielded this kind of influence from the outside. Journalists come and go, scandals erupt and fade, but Tom Bower represents something different. He does not chase headlines. He creates them. He is a reminder that in the modern monarchy, the greatest threats do not come from within Buckingham Palace, but from writers armed with truth, or at least the perception of it. And perception, in the world of royalty, can destroy as completely as fact. This chapter is not about whether Bower is right or wrong. It is about the weight of his voice, the inevitability of his impact, and the way his presence transforms a whisper into a roar. Before him, Harry could dismiss rumors as nonsense, the inventions of bitter detractors. After Bower, he cannot. Every time he looks at his children, he sees not just their faces, but the shadow of doubt cast by one man's words. Every time Meghan speaks, she does so with the knowledge that somewhere, Bower is waiting to dismantle her narrative piece by piece. The calm of Montecito is now shattered. The sanctuary Harry built for his family no longer feels safe, because safety is not about walls or guards, but about belief. And Bower has planted the seed of disbelief in the minds of millions. Were Archie and Lilibet born of Harry's blood, or are they the product of secrets too dangerous to reveal? The question hangs in the air like a blade, cutting through the Sussex's fairy tale, daring them to prove their truth in a world where proof is never enough. This is the storm Harry feared most, and Tom Bower is the man who summoned it. With his words, the illusion is broken, and the world is watching to see what falls apart first: Harry's panic, Meghan's defense, or the fragile story of Archie and Lilibet that now stands on trial before global opinion. Long before Tom Bower gave shape and weight to the suspicion, whispers had already traveled through corridors of power, across newsroom desks, and through the endless scroll of social media threads. Those whispers, often dismissed as cruel gossip, carried a haunting consistency. Meghan Markle's pregnancies did not add up. The whispers said that something was off, that the story the world was told about Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana was too carefully controlled, too sanitized, and too incomplete. At the time, Harry defended Meghan fiercely, shielding her behind the armor of his fury toward the press. But behind every shield is the fear of what happens when it breaks, and those whispers had been waiting for a man like Tom Bower to cut through. The whispers began with Archie. Even before his birth, Meghan's baby bump seemed to live a life of its own. Paparazzi photos showed a belly that appeared small one day, unusually large the next, then shifting oddly when she bent down. Some claimed these were tricks of the camera or the natural variations of pregnancy. Others insisted they saw something unnatural, fabric folding where it should not, an outline that seemed to collapse when Meghan crouched. The palace dismissed these murmurs as nonsense, but once an image is out in the public, it is hard to erase. Was she truly carrying the child, or was there another arrangement in place? Then came the secrecy of the birth itself. Royal tradition dictated transparency. Announcements of hospital locations, photographic evidence of the royal newborn leaving with mother and father, the sense that while the child was private, the birth was a public milestone. With Meghan, everything was different. The press was excluded, the hospital remained unclear for days, and the palace issued confused and contradictory statements. At one point, an announcement suggested Meghan had given birth hours before another statement claimed she was still in labor. The inconsistencies fed the flames of suspicion. Why would something so simple become so tangled, unless there was something to hide? Lilibet's birth only deepened the narrative. Delivered in California, the details were again shrouded in secrecy. There were no photographs from a hospital, no official medical briefings, no verifiable timeline. Instead, a carefully worded announcement was released, accompanied by staged photographs weeks later. Critics pointed out that even her birth certificate seemed to raise questions, with differences in how Meghan's name was listed compared to Archie's. Was this a simple bureaucratic quirk, or a signal of something deliberately concealed? The whispers refused to die. Within the chatter, one theory rose louder than the rest: surrogacy. Meghan, it was suggested, may have used a surrogate for one or both children, possibly even with a donor involved. In modern times, surrogacy is not unusual, but within the royal family, it carries enormous consequences. Bloodlines matter. Succession depends not just on love or legitimacy, but on genetics. A surrogate arrangement, especially one not involving Harry's biological connection, could upend everything. Could Meghan have chosen this path to maintain privacy or to protect herself medically? And if so, why hide it so fiercely? These whispers were not confined to fringe corners. Journalists noticed. Biographers noted discrepancies. Even royal watchers, loyal to the Windsors for decades, admitted unease. One commentator famously asked on air, "Why the secrecy, unless there's something to be secret about?" Meghan's defenders countered that this was racism, misogyny, the relentless scrutiny of a woman of color breaking royal tradition. And while that argument carried weight, it did not erase the growing list of oddities. For Harry, these whispers must have been daggers. He had lived his entire life under questions of paternity. The tabloids never let him forget the rumors about James Hewitt, the cavalry officer Diana was romantically linked to. The resemblance in hair color, the timing of Diana's affair, all became fodder for speculation that Harry was not Charles's son. Though the timeline made it impossible, the rumor persisted, haunting Harry well into adulthood. And now, those same whispers of illegitimacy were circling his children. The cruel symmetry of it must have been unbearable. But the whispers did not stop at surrogacy. Some took darker turns, suggesting Meghan had orchestrated a secret donor arrangement, perhaps even against Harry's knowledge. The suggestion was shocking, that Meghan, obsessed with securing children to cement her royal status and Hollywood narrative, might have ensured their births by any means necessary. These theories could not be proven, and perhaps never would be. But in the court of public opinion, proof is less important than possibility. Once the idea is planted, it grows roots. The most unsettling part of these whispers is how they fit into Meghan's larger reputation for control. From her early Hollywood days to her time in the palace, Meghan was known for scripting her narrative tightly. Every photograph, every quote, every public gesture was calculated. So when the most intimate details of her pregnancies seemed to follow the same pattern of stage management, people grew suspicious. If there was nothing to hide, why not follow tradition? Why not allow the world to see what had always been seen before? Instead, Meghan doubled down on privacy, and the whispers turned into accusations. Harry, meanwhile, seemed to unravel in small ways. His interviews became angrier, his defenses of Meghan more brittle. He lashed out at the press, at the institution, even at his family. Yet beneath the anger was something else: fragility. Was he protecting Meghan from cruelty, or was he protecting himself from the truth? For a man who had lost his mother to relentless media hounding, the line between paranoia and reality had blurred. The whispers about Meghan's pregnancies touched his deepest wounds, and his fiercest loyalty became his most dangerous vulnerability. The chapter of whispers is not about what is fact or fiction. It is about how those whispers gained life, how they filled the silence Meghan and Harry left behind. In the absence of transparency, suspicion thrives. And when those suspicions involve royal bloodlines, they carry consequences far greater than gossip. They threaten the legitimacy of titles, the credibility of an entire monarchy, and the identity of a man who already felt like an outsider in his own family. Now, with Tom Bower stepping into the story, those whispers are no longer shadows. They are headlines, spoken aloud by a man with credibility, amplified across newspapers and television screens. The whispers of a secret arrangement, once confined to speculation, are now part of a narrative Harry cannot escape. And as they grow louder, the world begins to ask the question Harry fears most. Are Archie and Lilibet truly his? Or are they the living proof of a secret too explosive to admit? The storm is no longer approaching. It has arrived, and the whispers are now screams echoing across the walls of Montecito and Buckingham Palace alike. The outside world sees Harry through headlines and interviews, through staged photographs and carefully edited documentaries. But behind the cameras, behind the rehearsed smiles, lies a man who has been living in a constant storm of contradictions. Harry's inner struggle is not a sudden reaction to Tom Bower's claims. It is the culmination of years of buried doubts, old wounds reopened, and the suffocating weight of loyalty colliding with truth. This is the chapter where Harry's facade begins to crack, not in public, not yet, but in the private moments where his voice trembles and his thoughts turn against him. From his earliest days, Harry was haunted by the shadow of his own legitimacy. The cruel rumor that James Hewitt was his real father followed him relentlessly. It didn't matter that timelines disproved it, that even Hewitt himself dismissed the gossip. The image of red hair, the whispers of Diana's affairs, the tabloids splashing his supposed illegitimacy across front pages. All of it scarred him. He grew up knowing what it felt like to be questioned, to be treated as an outsider within the family he was born into. He often joked about being the spare, but beneath the humor was a festering wound, the fear that he did not truly belong. Now, decades later, those same whispers of illegitimacy have circled back, but this time aimed at his children. For Harry, it feels like a cruel cosmic punishment. The very pain he endured as a child has become the doubt surrounding his own fatherhood. The circle has closed, and he cannot escape its suffocating grip. Every time he looks at Archie and Lilibet, he feels a rush of love that only a father could know, but now Bower's words gnaw at him. What if the love he feels is real, but the blood tie is not? What if history has repeated itself, but this time the whispers are true? Harry's loyalty to Meghan complicates everything. He has always defended her fiercely, often to the point of self-destruction. When his family questioned her motives, he cut them off. When the press ridiculed her, he lashed out in fury. His entire identity after leaving the monarchy became entwined with proving Meghan right and everyone else wrong. To question her now, even privately, would mean admitting that he had sacrificed his family, his homeland, and his reputation for someone who may have kept secrets from him. That realization terrifies him more than the gossip itself. Imagine Harry pacing late at night in Montecito, the glow of his phone screen illuminating his face as he scrolls through social media. He sees strangers dissecting Meghan's bump, comparing photos, debating timelines. He throws the phone down in anger, but the images remain in his mind. He remembers moments that seemed odd at the time, questions he brushed aside, inconsistencies he ignored. Meghan had always had an answer, always brushed it off as paranoia or cruelty from the outside world. And Harry, desperate to protect her, accepted those answers without pushing further. But now, Bauer's voice has reawakened those buried doubts, and they haunt him in silence. His inner struggle is not just emotional, but existential. Harry has built his identity as a father on the idea that he is different from Charles. Where Charles was cold and distant, Harry prides himself on being warm and present. Where the monarchy failed Diana, Harry has promised to never fail Meghan and his children. But what happens if those children are not biologically his? Does that diminish his love? Does it strip away his right to call himself their father? These are questions he cannot answer, because they cut into the very core of who he believes he is. In the quiet of his home, away from Meghan's commanding presence, Harry replays memories in his mind. The day Archie was born, he remembers holding the baby awkwardly for the cameras, forcing a smile that felt strained. He remembers how Meghan insisted on controlling every detail of the announcement, how the palace seemed oddly out of sync. He remembers how his own family reacted with polite smiles but wary eyes. At the time, he thought they were being cruel to Meghan. Now, he wonders if they knew something he didn't. With Lilibet, the distance grew sharper. Born in California, far from the traditions of Windsor, Harry felt both liberated and uneasy. He wanted to celebrate privately, but he also knew that secrecy breeds suspicion. Meghan dismissed his worries, assuring him that they were free to write their own rules now. Yet deep inside, Harry felt the ground shifting beneath him. He wanted to believe her, but he could not silence the voice inside that whispered, "Why does everything have to be hidden? Why can't we just be normal?" The psychological strain shows in his behavior. Friends who speak to him notice his paranoia. He repeats himself often, ranting about the press, about betrayal, about his family's cruelty. Yet between the lines, there is a man asking for reassurance, for someone to tell him that what he feels is not madness. Meghan provides answers, but they are scripted, rehearsed, calculated. She frames everything as an attack from the outside, never as something to question within. And Harry, torn between doubt and loyalty, chooses loyalty again and again, though each time, it costs him another piece of his peace. The tragedy of Harry's inner struggle is that he is not just fighting the world, he is fighting himself. He is a man divided between the father he wants to be, the husband he promised to be, and the son he has always been. He wants to protect Meghan, but he cannot shake the suspicion that he needs protection from her truth. He wants to shield his children, but he cannot silence the voice that asks whether they are truly his. He wants to believe in the sanctuary he has built in California, but the storm outside has seeped into his walls, and no amount of security guards can keep it at bay. In this struggle, Harry embodies the theme of the entire scandal, the clash between image and reality. To the world, he is the devoted father of two, a man who risked everything for love. But inside, he is haunted by the same questions that tabloids and biographers now amplify. Who are Archie and Lilibet? Are they the heirs of his bloodline? Or are they symbols of a secret arrangement he has spent years refusing to confront? The chapter closes on the image of Harry staring into a mirror, his reflection both familiar and foreign. He sees Diana's eyes in his own, the same pain she once carried when truth and image collided. He hears the whispers of his childhood, the accusations of illegitimacy, the doubt that never left him. And now, he wonders if those same whispers will haunt his children. His inner struggle is not over. It is only beginning. And as Tom Bauer's revelations spread, Harry's silence becomes a scream only he can hear, echoing louder with each passing day. While Harry's panic grew louder with every passing day, Meghan's reaction to Tom Bauer's revelations took a strikingly different form. Where Harry paced, ranted, and wrestled with ghosts of doubt, Meghan cloaked herself in a silence that was as deliberate as it was unnerving. Silence, after all, had always been one of her most potent weapons. In Hollywood, in the palace, and in the glare of global media, Meghan had learned that words can be twisted, but silence leaves room for speculation she can later bend to her advantage. And now, with Bauer's accusations reverberating around the world, she retreated into that familiar strategy, calculating, watching, and waiting. It was not the silence of fear. Meghan had built her life on controlling narratives, and she knew that every scandal was both a crisis and an opportunity. For her, the panic swirling around Harry was not the end of the world. It was a chessboard. She had long understood that public perception is not shaped by truth alone, but by timing, framing, and delivery. A single well-placed statement could turn enemies into villains and herself into the victim of yet another unjust attack. So as Harry unraveled, Meghan observed, mapping out her next move with the precision of someone who had navigated storms before. This is not the first time Meghan used silence as a shield. During her time in the palace, when rumors about her clashes with staff surfaced, she often said nothing directly. Instead, allies and friends spoke on her behalf, shaping the narrative without her fingerprints on it. When the British press accused her of bullying, she did not rush to deny it in her own words. Instead, she let carefully chosen voices dismiss the claims as institutional racism or jealousy. Even in her legal battle with the Mail on Sunday, she revealed little until the last possible moment, keeping control of the stage until she could strike with maximum effect. Silence had become part of her brand, mysterious, dignified, untouchable. But this silence was different. This time, the accusations cut deeper, threatening not just her reputation, but the very foundation of the family she had constructed with Harry. Allegations about the children were not mere gossip. They threatened to dismantle the Sussex image of love, independence, and modernity. Meghan's silence here was not just defensive, it was tactical. Every word she might speak could open new doors of scrutiny. Any denial could prompt demands for proof. And Meghan knew better than anyone that once the world demands proof, control is lost. Behind closed doors, however, silence did not mean inaction. Meghan is known for rehearsing responses, for planning words with meticulous care, for anticipating every question. Those who have worked with her say she thrives in strategy sessions, turning crises into performances where she always emerges as the wronged heroine. As Harry spiraled, Meghan reportedly sought advice from her circle, Hollywood insiders, PR strategists, and legal counsel. The question was not whether to respond, but how, when, and in what form. Should she frame Bauer as a misogynistic bully? Should she lean into the narrative of racial persecution once again? Or should she use the children themselves, selectively releasing carefully staged photographs, to remind the world of their humanity and shift attention away from speculation? Her silence also served another purpose. It amplified Harry's isolation. The more he panicked, the more she appeared composed, almost serene. To outsiders, this contrast could be interpreted as strength. Meghan was the calm in the storm, while Harry seemed fragile, unstable. In the narrative battle, her composure positioned her as the rational one, the mother under siege but standing tall, while Harry's panic risked painting him as paranoid. And Meghan understood that contrast better than anyone. Every time Harry lashed out, she grew quieter, letting his emotional unraveling bolster her image as the steady hand. In Harry's mind, Meghan's silence became a double-edged sword. On one hand, he admired her ability to remain unshaken, her refusal to let the media dictate her emotions. On the other, he resented it. He wanted reassurance, not strategy. He wanted words of comfort, not calculations. At night, when he voiced his doubts, Meghan's responses felt rehearsed, polished, like lines from a script. He asked her directly, sometimes angrily, whether the rumors were true. She would smile, shake her head, and change the subject, framing the issue not as one of truth but of persecution. "They're attacking us because we're strong," she would say. But Harry did not want a strategy. He wanted an answer. And in her silence, his doubts only grew. Observers outside could sense this dynamic. The more Meghan said nothing, the more the world speculated about what she was hiding. Rumors of secret surrogates, donor arrangements, even whispered betrayals gained traction not because of evidence, but because of silence. In a world addicted to information, silence is filled with whatever people most want, or fear, to believe. Meghan knew this, and perhaps she was willing to let the silence fester because she believed she could later reclaim control. But for Harry, living inside the silence was unbearable. Every quiet moment became an echo chamber of his worst fears. The strategic silence also allowed Meghan to prepare the long game. She had mastered the art of narrative redemption, turned scandal into victimhood, victimhood into empowerment, and empowerment into brand. Every controversy she had faced, from accusations of bullying to the Oprah interview fallout, had been repurposed into a storyline of resilience. This one, she believed, could be no different. If the narrative was that her children were under attack, she could use it to reinforce her image as a protective mother, a woman persecuted simply for daring to live freely. But to play that card, timing was everything. Speak too soon, and the scandal dominates. Wait long enough, and the scandal becomes the backdrop to her triumph. And so Meghan remained silent, letting Harry stew in panic, letting Bower's voice grow louder, letting the world devour rumors until they were bloated with curiosity. Then, when the time was right, she would speak. Or perhaps she would not speak at all, letting others defend her while she floated above the fray. This was her genius and her cruelty, her ability to turn silence into theater, to make absence as powerful as presence. In this chapter, Meghan's strategic silence is more than a refusal to answer. It is an entire philosophy of control. For her, words are ammunition, and ammunition must be saved for the decisive strike. But for Harry, silence is suffocation, a constant reminder that the truth he craves may never come. And as Bower's revelations gain momentum, Meghan's silence begins to look less like strength and more like the quiet before an explosion. To grasp the weight of Tom Bower's claims, one must first understand the central obsession of monarchy, bloodline. Royal families are not merely symbolic. Their very legitimacy rests upon the unbroken continuity of blood, the certainty that those who inherit crowns and titles do so because they are born of the right lineage. A monarchy without biological certainty is a house built on sand. This is why, throughout history, questions of paternity and legitimacy have ignited wars, toppled dynasties, and scarred nations. And now, centuries of tradition and expectation converge on the two small children of Harry and Meghan, Archie and Lilibet, whose very existence has become a battlefield of suspicion. For the British monarchy, blood is not just thicker than water, it is law. Succession to the throne depends entirely on ancestry. Each birth recorded with precision, each lineage traced back for generations. Every royal birth has been more than a family celebration. It is a national event, a confirmation that the line continues unbroken. That is why the secrecy surrounding Archie and Lilibet's births was so jarring. Where previous heirs were presented on hospital steps, with certificates, medical records, and witnesses ensuring legitimacy, Harry and Meghan shrouded their children in silence and ambiguity. In doing so, they provoked not only curiosity but existential doubt. History offers many examples of how fragile royal legitimacy can be. Consider the Wars of the Roses in the 15th century, a brutal conflict sparked by rival claims to the English throne, each rooted in arguments over bloodlines. Or the Glorious Revolution, when James II's newborn son was widely rumored to have been smuggled into the birthing chamber in a warming pan, prompting accusations that the child was not truly his and thus sparking a political crisis. Even more recently, whispers about King Edward VIII's alliances or Prince Philip's German heritage had implications far beyond gossip. They threatened stability itself. In each case, legitimacy was not an abstract question but the very foundation upon which monarchy stood. Against this backdrop, Tom Bower's suggestion that Archie and Lilibet may not be Harry's biological children is not just scandal, it is heresy. If true, it would not merely embarrass Harry and Meghan. It would fracture the very notion of what makes a Windsor royal. Archie and Lilibet carry titles, however tenuous, as grandchildren of the sovereign. They are recognized as part of the line of succession. If their blood is not Windsor blood, then the line itself has been compromised, and the crown loses not only credibility but coherence. For King Charles, this question carries immense weight. The monarchy he now leads is fragile, buffeted by public skepticism, Republican sentiment, and the constant shadow of Diana's ghost. His legitimacy as king is already questioned by those who believe the crown should have passed directly to William. To allow doubts about his grandchildren's legitimacy to fester unchecked would risk weakening his reign further. At the same time, Charles must tread carefully. Publicly challenging his son's children would not only devastate Harry, but also risk turning global opinion against the monarchy itself. The bloodline question is both a sword and a noose. William, by contrast, may see opportunity. For years, he has borne the weight of being the heir, the steady counterpoint to Harry's rebellion. If Archie and Lilibet are not biologically Harry's, then William's own children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, stand even more securely as the future of the crown. Where Harry once posed a symbolic alternative, carving out his role as a global humanitarian and father, he would now be diminished, his children sidelined from history. William, pragmatic and cautious, would likely say little in public, but privately the question would solidify his determination to protect the monarchy's survival at all costs. The question of bloodlines also reverberates with the public in ways that transcend royalty. People project their own experiences onto the scandal. Parents wonder how they would feel if told their children were not biologically theirs. Children reflect on their own sense of identity, their connection to ancestry and heritage. The notion of a child born from secrets touches something primal, something that goes beyond monarchy and into the heart of what it means to belong. That is why Bower's claims cut so deeply. They are not merely about titles and crowns, but about family itself. Harry, of course, understands this better than anyone. His own life was shaped by whispers of illegitimacy. He grew up hearing that Charles might not be his father, that Diana's affair with James Hewitt had produced him. Those rumors, though baseless in fact, wounded him deeply, leaving scars that shaped his mistrust of the media and his obsession with protecting Meghan. To now face those same whispers directed at his children is a nightmare of symmetry. The son once accused of not being royal enough now faces the possibility that his children will be accused of the same. The cycle of doubt has not been broken. It has been inherited. But what makes this chapter even more devastating is the role Meghan plays in it. For centuries, royal brides were chosen carefully, their backgrounds scrutinized for suitability, their fertility considered paramount. Meghan, a divorced American actress of mixed heritage, was already a break from tradition. For some, she symbolized progress, a new and modern monarchy. For others, she was a threat, an outsider who could destabilize the institution. By marrying Harry, she carried both the promise of renewal and the fear of disruption. And now, with whispers that she may have orchestrated secret arrangements for her children's births, she embodies the very uncertainty monarchists dread. The royal bloodline question is not about Meghan's character alone. It is about the monarchy's survival. Every time a headline speculates about Archie and Lilibet's parentage, it chips away at the Windsor brand. Every time Bower's words are quoted, it pushes the institution closer to crisis. For Harry, the weight of history bears down not just as a personal struggle, but as a collective one. His children are not only his, they belong, in the eyes of millions, to the story of Britain itself. And if that story is a lie, then the monarchy risks unraveling further in a world already questioning its relevance. This chapter ends with a haunting truth. The question of bloodlines has always been the monarchy's most dangerous vulnerability. From the warming pan baby to Diana's red-haired son, from whispered affairs to rumors of surrogacy, the same pattern repeats. Secrets lead to suspicion, suspicion to scandal, scandal to crisis. Harry may want to see Archie and Lilibet simply as his children, free from the weight of crowns and history. But the world will not let him. In the eyes of tradition, they are not just children, they are heirs. And heirs must carry proof of blood. Without it, the monarchy is nothing more than a story, and stories can be rewritten. The public is often the final judge of royal scandals. And in the case of Tom Bower's claims about Archie and Lilibet, the reaction was nothing short of explosive. When the whispers of a secret arrangement were no longer confined to obscure corners of social media, but thrust into mainstream discussion by a biographer with a reputation for accuracy, the world erupted in debates, memes, fury, and fascination. The storm of opinion spanned continents, with Britain, America, and the Commonwealth each responding in different but equally impassioned ways. The monarchy had survived centuries of gossip, but in an age of digital immediacy, a single accusation could spiral into a global narrative within hours. In Britain, the reaction was visceral. Newspapers splashed Bower's words across their front pages, with headlines designed to both shock and provoke. Questions over Archie's birth resurface. One tabloid declared. Royal line in doubt? Asked another. More measured outlets tried to frame it as speculation, careful not to cross into outright accusations. But the implication was clear. The legitimacy of Harry's children was up for public trial. Television programs dedicated entire segments to dissecting Meghan's pregnancies, replaying footage of her bending in awkward positions, zooming in on her baby bump, analyzing inconsistencies. The British public, long divided over Harry and Meghan, took their battle lines once again. Supporters cried foul, accusing the press of cruelty and racism. Critics said this was the inevitable result of Meghan's obsession with secrecy. In America, the reaction was more conflicted. On one hand, Meghan and Harry had carefully cultivated their image as victims of the monarchy, finding sympathy among audiences who saw them as underdogs breaking free from centuries of tradition. For many Americans, the idea that Meghan might have used surrogacy or alternative arrangements was not scandalous, but normal. Hollywood stars had done the same, and surrogacy was increasingly seen as a private choice. But even in America, the question of deception resonated. It wasn't about whether Meghan used a surrogate. It was about whether she lied about it, whether Harry had been complicit in constructing a story that was not true. And for Americans who had once admired the couple's openness, this raised uncomfortable doubts. Social media turned the scandal into a spectacle. Hashtags like #SurrogateSussex, #NotHarry'sKids, and #BauerBombshell trended worldwide. Twitter exploded with side-by-side photographs comparing Archie's features to Harry's and Meghan's, with some insisting on uncanny resemblances and others declaring no similarity at all. TikTok users created viral videos dissecting Meghan's appearances during pregnancy, some sympathetic, others mocking. Instagram filled with memes portraying Harry as a man fooled, as a father betrayed. The speed of these reactions left Harry and Meghan with little time to respond. In the digital age, silence was no longer a shield. It was an invitation for the crowd to invent its own truths. Public reaction was not limited to gossip. Political commentators weighed in, noting how this scandal might affect the monarchies standing in Commonwealth countries already questioning their allegiance to the crown. In Australia, Republicans seized on the story as proof of a monarchy mired in secrecy and scandal. In Canada, debates reignited about why the nation continued to recognize Charles as head of state. In the Caribbean, where calls to sever ties with the crown had grown louder, Bauer's revelation became another talking point in the argument that the monarchy had outlived its credibility. What began as a personal scandal for Harry and Meghan threatened to ripple into a geopolitical question about the future of the institution itself. The emotional core of the public reaction, however, lay in empathy and betrayal. Parents around the world put themselves in Harry's shoes, imagining the agony of being told their children were not biologically theirs. Some sympathized, arguing that even if true, Harry's love for Archie and Lilibet made him their father in every way that mattered. Others expressed outrage on his behalf, casting Meghan as a manipulator who had trapped him in a web of lies. Still others defended Meghan fiercely, calling the scandal an invasion of privacy, a weaponization of motherhood to tear down a woman who dared to defy the monarchy. The debate was not just about facts, but about values: honesty, loyalty, love, and power. Meanwhile, the press fed the fire. Talk shows debated whether Meghan should release medical records. Journalists pressed palace officials for comment, only to be met with silence. Former staffers began leaking stories, anonymously, of course, about strange instructions during Meghan's pregnancies, about unexplained absences, about conversations that now seemed suspicious. Each leak added fuel to the blaze, and the public devoured every word. Truth no longer mattered. Perception had become reality, and reality was devastating for Harry. The reaction also revealed the deep fault lines within Harry and Meghan's own supporter base. Some who had once defended them without question began to express unease. They did not want to believe the children's parentage was in doubt, but they could not ignore the mounting inconsistencies. For the first time, cracks appeared in the wall of unwavering loyalty that Meghan had carefully built. Her silence, once a sign of dignity, now looked evasive. Her refusal to engage, once interpreted as strength, now seemed suspicious. And Harry, once admired for his devotion, now looked fragile, broken, and perhaps even blind. In this eruption of public opinion, Harry's greatest fear became reality. He was no longer in control of his own story. The love he felt for his children was real, but the world now questioned whether that love was built on a lie. Meghan's narrative mastery was no match for the chaos of millions of voices demanding answers. And Tom Bower's revelation, whether true or not, had achieved its goal. It had planted doubt so deep that no press release or photograph could uproot it. The chapter closes with a chilling image. Harry watching the news in Montecito as anchors debate his children's bloodline, his face pale, his hands clenched. Outside his window, Archie and Lilibet play, innocent of the storm engulfing them. But Harry knows innocence cannot shield them forever. The public has spoken, the reaction has erupted, and the world is now asking a question he cannot bear to answer. Are these truly his children, or has the greatest royal deception of all been hidden in plain sight? Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, scandals are not merely gossip. They are crises of state. For centuries, the monarchy has survived wars, abdications, and betrayals not by ignoring scandal, but by managing it with ruthless precision. So when Tom Bower's claims about Archie and Lilibet began ricocheting through the press, the palace machine whirred into motion. Courtiers, advisors, and senior royals knew at once that this was not just another Sussex controversy. This was a direct threat to the crown itself, because it raised the one question the monarchy could never allow to go unanswered: who truly belongs to the royal bloodline? Behind closed doors, King Charles was briefed immediately. His private secretaries laid the headlines before him, summarizing the firestorm brewing across the world. The king's reaction was, as ever, a study in restraint. Outwardly, he betrayed little emotion, but those who know him well say his jaw tightened, his fingers drummed the table, and his silence grew heavier with every passing second. Charles understood the stakes. His reign was still young, fragile, and under intense scrutiny. He had worked tirelessly to present himself as a steady, dignified successor to Elizabeth II. But a scandal involving his son's children threatened to reopen every wound left by Diana, every fracture exposed by Harry and Meghan's departure. The palace faced a dilemma. To comment directly on the accusations risked legitimizing them, giving oxygen to a fire that might otherwise burn itself out. But to remain silent risked confirming suspicions, allowing the narrative to spiral out of their control. The courtiers debated fiercely. Some urged a swift denial, a strong statement reaffirming Archie and Lilibet as legitimate grandchildren of the king. Others counseled caution, warning that any denial could trigger demands for proof. Proof the palace may not be able to provide without dragging the children into the public arena in ways no one wanted. William's position in this was complicated. As heir to the throne, he had the most to gain and the most to lose. Privately, he was furious, not at Bower, but at Harry. To William, this was yet another example of how his younger brother's choices had destabilized the monarchy. First came the Oprah interview, then the Netflix documentaries, then Spare. Each time, William had watched the institution absorb blows it should never have had to endure. And now, Harry's children, the very symbols of his rebellion, had become the center of a scandal that threatened the crown. In William's eyes, this was not just reckless. It was unforgivable. Camilla, too, weighed in. Having endured decades of being cast as the villain in the Diana saga, she understood the cruelty of public suspicion better than most. Yet her advice was cold, pragmatic. The monarchy's survival came first. Protecting Harry and Meghan had never been her priority. If doubts about Archie and Lilibet created distance between the Sussexes and the crown, then perhaps it was a blessing in disguise. Camilla believed the institution must cut ties cleanly if it was to endure. And while Charles may have recoiled at such bluntness, he did not dismiss it. The palace press office prepared contingency statements. Drafts were written and rewritten, each one attempting to balance denial with dignity, protection of the children with preservation of the institution. Yet, even as they worked, they knew they were already behind the story. Social media had raced ahead, headlines had multiplied, and the narrative had taken root. The palace, so used to controlling the tempo of royal news, now found itself on the defensive, dragged into a battlefield it had hoped to avoid. Meanwhile, behind the gilded doors, private conversations grew more pointed. Advisors reminded Charles of the precedent set by the warming pan scandal of 1688, when James II's legitimacy crisis shook the throne. They warned that allowing even a whisper of doubt about Archie and Lilibet could reignite Republican sentiment across the Commonwealth. The monarchy's strength, they insisted, lay not in popularity but in continuity. And continuity depended on certainty. The whispers must be silenced, one way or another. Yet silencing was easier said than done. The palace could not control Tom Bower. He was not a tabloid hack to be placated with access or favors. He was an independent force, unbending, and he thrived on defiance. If the palace attacked him, he would double down. If they ignored him, he would grow louder. And so the royals found themselves trapped in a paradox. They needed to discredit the story without touching it, to protect the children without exposing them, to defend Harry without appearing to endorse him. Inside family circles, tension grew sharper. Charles is said to have asked his closest advisors whether Meghan had ever disclosed medical details about her pregnancies. The answer was vague, not in any way that satisfied tradition. That vagueness unsettled him. For a man who had spent his life preparing for kingship, who had lived through the collapse of his marriage and the death of Diana, ambiguity was the one thing he could not afford. William, for his part, pressed his father to take a harder line. He believed the monarchy must quietly but firmly distance itself from the Sussexes, allowing public opinion to push them further into exile. Harry, of course, was aware of the palace's deliberations, even if only through whispers and leaks. To him, the realization that his own family might be questioning the legitimacy of his children was a fresh betrayal. He had already accused them of cruelty, of racism, of abandonment. But this cut to the bone. It was one thing for the press to speculate. It was another for his father and brother to even entertain the possibility. The very institution he had fled was now poised to use his children as pawns in its survival. The palace reaction revealed the monarchy at its most calculating. Publicly, they said nothing. Privately, they considered every angle, every risk, every potential consequence. In their eyes, Archie and Lilibet were not just Harry's children. They were symbols, chess pieces on a board where perception mattered more than truth. The courtiers and royals weighed whether protecting them would weaken the crown or whether letting suspicion linger might ultimately serve its survival. The chapter closes with an image of Buckingham Palace at night, its windows glowing faintly under a London sky. Inside, the machinery of monarchy grinds on, cold and relentless, while outside, the world speculates wildly about two small children thousands of miles away in California. For the palace, this is not about innocence or guilt, love or betrayal. It is about survival. And survival, in the monarchy, has always come at the cost of truth.